So I could give you a million guesses and you could never guess what my most viewed video was about. I could give you a million guesses and you'd never get it. Because in years upon years of making YouTube videos and TikToks about Canadian politics and about lots of different sort of Canadian specific topics, my most successful video of all time, viewed by like 3 million ish people now, was about Boney M and how they're the same guy who made all the music for Boney M, made all the music for Milli Vanilli. Which is like just a delightful fun fact. And like
Right.
literally it was around Christmas and the Boney M Christmas album resurfaces as it always does. And I thought, oh, this will be a fun thing to do. And it exploded.
Have been creating content for 20 plus years in this space. And yet I'm of a generation that still finds it very difficult to believe that people can actually make money doing this, let alone a teacher. And that's exactly the profile of today's guest, Steve Boots. Steve is, as he calls himself, Canada's Internet Social Studies teacher. He is on a leave right now from one of the school divisions here in Saskatchewan, but it looks like he's going to continue his journey in creating content online and making a living from it. And so I just had to reach out to him and find out exactly how that works and kind of his insights on not only content creation, but also politics and being a social studies teacher, and how that's kind of continuing to fulfill his desires to teach, which is essentially what he's still doing. It's just in a different format. So this is a really unique conversation. For those of you that don't really understand this world, Steve will give you a little bit of an insight as to how that all works. He's, again, very, very witty, very clever. He patterns himself. He talks about Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert as kind of his influences. If you watch his videos, you get a sense of that. Very biting commentary, if you will, but just an outstanding guest. I've got a list of about 10 really wonderful clips that you'll hear throughout this interview that I'll probably be able to use for a long time. Just so many great insights. And again, I like the change of pace that I have here talking with Steve and his foray into being, I don't think he calls himself an influencer, but he is. Enjoy today with Steve Boots.
So, Steve, it is my show, as you just said. And I like the fun part about podcasting is I got to do whatever I want. And like I said to you, like, I can't believe that somebody just lets me have a mic and produces this. And it's like kind of wild. Like, what do I have to say?
Yeah, you can buy them at the store. It's crazy.
And, the only real criteria for my show is that you're Canadian, because I actually do get a lot of Americans, you would get a zillion of these emails from, hey, can I, whatever, partner with you, blah, blah, blah. And of course I just say, okay, you're not Canadian. So that's one thing. You are, I don't know if what do you call yourself right now?
I like broadly, if people are asking like in a really professional sense, I'll usually call it commentator, like online commentator or content creator. But I usually just call myself the internet social studies teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, teacher is really why, so the other criteria of my show is that you have something to do with education. You are and I don't even know, do you like former educator or just as educator? What sort of makes sense to you?
I'm technically still employed until the end of June. Technically still educator, soon to be a former educator, but like, I don't know if that's a role you ever really leave.
I know people always say too, well, I mean, I'm still, like you said, you're an internet teacher. I'm a teacher. That's just who I am and what I do. So whatever context and quote unquote classrooms I do it in. So yeah, no. So for people that don't know you and are thinking, because the audience that I have might not be aware of you and what you do, which is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on, is to introduce you to people who are generally fairly influential in the world of public education, particularly. But I came across your work on TikTok, a number of years ago, and you were at that time kind of a little bit mix of education / politics, social commentary. So there was a little bit more kind of school related stuff. You talked about classroom situations and kind of how you did things. And so again, that was sort of my entry. And then what was the moment for you, I guess, in that Well, let me go backward. Why in the world, what prompted you to think I should actually start a TikTok channel and start talking? Is it just because you're like me and you like to hear yourself talk? Like my wife says, you just like to listen to yourself talk. Was that it or what was it?
It's so funny because I feel like all content creators to at least some degree pretend there isn't ego involved.
Sure.
There is.
Sure.
Let's all be honest here. We turn on cameras and talk to ourselves because we think what we have is worth hearing. But for me, it's such a distinctly teacher thing. I was in the room right opposite where I'm sitting now, working on report cards, and I was stalling. And I was like, why don't I've been watching a lot of TikToks. Why don't I just try and make them one? Just see what it's like. And literally all I wanted to do was try it out as a tool and see what it was like to make a TikTok. That's all I was after. And so I made a TikTok about the resignation of the head of the Sask Health Authority, Scott Livingston, because I chose an intentionally kind of niche topic. I was like, nobody's going to care. Like even if it does well, it's not going to do that well, right? And it was really slow paced. It was really, you could see like the outlines of what I was going to become, but it was very beginner. And it did 70,000 views, and I had like 8,000 followers in the first day. And it was literally like, oh, I guess this is a thing I do now. And it's literally just, I don't know. When that happens, you kind of go like, is this something? Do I have like lightning in a bottle here? Like, have I stumbled into something? And turns out I had. And so I'm really a big believer in when life gives you opportunities, chasing after them and seeing what's behind that door. And it's been a pretty wild experience since then.
Yeah. And so up until that point, what was your involvement with like social media in general? Like,
Oh man. So it's kind of funny. Like I actually had made a plan to delete all my social medias because they were bumming me out. But way long ago, I think 3, maybe 4 rounds of bargaining ago, I remember I started writing really long posts on Facebook,
okay.
breaking down the economics of salary negotiations. And like, again, sort of you could see the bones of it, like lots of graphs and charts and cited sources, and like very much formatted the way I format my stuff now, just in very long posts. And for an individual Facebook account from just an ordinary guy with a couple of hundred friends, like everybody else's Facebook account, those popped off. They got like thousands of likes and got like real circulation. And it was like a little fun little brush of like, hey, these are doing really well. That's pretty cool. And then the contract was resolved and I kind of carried on with life. And then COVID happened and I started running my mouth on Twitter a lot. And I started making threads breaking down things that Scott Moe was doing. Same thing. Like I always gravitated towards the long form. And then so those kind of caught on. And so I was kind of a little bit of a politics guy, at least in like the Twitterverse when I started making TikToks. Like it all sort of evolved from itself along the way.
And again, how, I guess, you've talked about, all right, long form approach is a little bit more like there's all these little styles, right? Like the sort of initial Twitter model was, that sort of witty repertoire you might be able to pull off in the 140 originally or the 280. So there was a skill there that certain people really could grasp.
You needed to be very economical.
Very. So that was, those constraints sort of, showcased people. And I liked playing in that space because that was kind of a fun, like, all right, how funny can I be in a really short time? it was just a game at some point. It's like, okay, that actually comes off pretty clever.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But then like, how would you see that as being, all right, that's my initial kind of the way that I am, the way that I want to represent to the way you are today? Like, I mean, obviously you're better today than you were when you first started, as is everybody, right? Anybody that creates stuff, the first stuff they do is maybe not great, but like, so how do you kind of track the evolution of your, even just a process, but kind of your refinement of your skill, your communication skills?
So when it comes to like technical process, it's pretty straightforward because it's just iterative. You do it so often that and if you're actively working to refine your processes as you're doing them, if you do something 1,000 times and you're trying to get better at it as you're doing it, you'll get better at it just kind of by definition, by just the nature of practice. But when it comes to improving my presentation, it's funny. The biggest difference that I've experienced has been moving my focus. I used to like reply to comments a lot and spend a lot of energy on like other creators and spend a lot of energy on just like, I don't know, some of the really goofy stuff of politics, like the stuff that we all know doesn't matter.
Right.
And realize the more that I spend my energy on the powerful, the better my content is. Right? Because like if you think about it, like the example that pops into my head is the thing with the liberals and the buttons that were like allegedly planted at events or something like that. I can't remember what the details were, but there were like campaign buttons that were phony and planted or whatever. And nobody who wasn't a politics nerd knew about it. Like the extremely online Twitter people were all like, "Oh my god, these buttons, it's a catastrophe of the election." And nobody in the real world gave a damn. And I think that what's improved my content the most is recognizing that I need to be talking to the people out in the real world and not the chronically online. And the more that I've done that, the better my content has gotten.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you talk about you're, in other words, you're kind of taking niche concepts or niche stories, but trying to make them less niche and more sort of wide what I care about the button issues.
Yeah.
What does this mean to me kind of thing?
That's sort of the heart of the internet social studies teachers thing is like, as a teacher, there's always some degree of salesmanship,
Yeah.
right? It's not just here's interesting information. There's that layer of like, here's why you want to know this, right? Maybe it's a little bit of fun presentation. Maybe it's posing an interesting question. Maybe it's just an interesting way you contextualize it, but you're doing somewhat of a sales job, right? And so I think that's a big part of it. I think that's sort of how you draw people in. It's the same sort of skill set. Like, really, what I'm doing is just teaching in a different venue. The skill set is nearly identical. The only difference is video editing, basically.
Yes, but I guess I wonder if prior to your sort of, leaving the classrooms to try this out, was there any point where either, your employee, a union, anybody else challenged you and said, "Hey, that's not appropriate for a social studies teacher to be posting on"? Did you ever have any of that problems before?
So, a couple of things, never from like my employer, never from the STF. Usually it was just like some member of the public who sent an email.
Right.
Like nothing, nobody was ever actively tried to stop me. Nobody ever, it was really interesting. I always expected way more friction than I
Right.
got. And like when I say emails, one or two,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this was not a thing that was ever like a real going concern. I remember one time, there's been once or twice that somebody has reached out and been like, "Hey, can you tell me about what happened here?" And it's like, "Oh, this happened." And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's fine. That's nothing." I always expected it to go worse than it did.
Yeah.
I have my suspicions about why. I think one big part of it is that I was always pretty diligent about following administrative procedures and the rules and not identifying my employer, not directly talking about my employer. If I was doing advocacy related to the STF, having the good sense to shut my mouth when my ideas weren't aligned with the STF. And not even because I knew I'd get in trouble or anything like that. It's more just like those are not external conversations to
Yeah.
have, right? If you've got concerns, then you
Sure.
have them internally. So things like that, knowing what were wise things and unwise things to talk about, I think served me. But I think the other part of it is honestly because my account exploded so quickly. I think honestly I just got big enough that it would have been a huge headache for them to.
Interesting.
I don't know if I necessarily believe that or not, but I think there's some cynical part of me that suspects that if I wasn't making a lot of waves directly with the employer, it was probably decided it wasn't a concern or wasn't worth pushing on. I don't really know. All I know is that it was never a problem. And I honestly always felt pretty supported, which was really cool and not what I would have guessed would have happened, but something I was really pleasantly surprised by.
Well, and I'm curious because I feel that the things that come to mind, the stories that I think about when it comes to educators, sort of sharing online is more kind of US challenges with people not liking what you said about this political issue and people getting in trouble like that. I don't know of any of my Canadian colleagues that have really faced that kind of challenge. And then we were talking about, and again, we apologize, Joanne, Unlearned 16 from Ontario, who is also pretty provocative in a lot of the things that she says, but I get the sense that she doesn't probably have a lot of challenges either. But Like, was there is there anything, I guess, here's the other question. Is there anything that you have produced anytime that you would say that's probably not appropriate for a classroom situation? Or is most of, I mean, and I don't mean about like, I'm not talking about language specific. I'm just talking about content. Like, is there something you'd say like, yeah, I wouldn't talk about that in my classroom?
So only in the sense that some stuff would have been maybe a little old for the students that I would have taught, like
Not relevant.
something at higher maturity level or something like that. But no, if you are a teacher and making public content, you need to be acutely aware your kids are going to find it. Your kids are going to find it. Big account, small account, doesn't matter. They're going to find it. You have to sort of live with that assumption and recognize like it's going to get seen. And if what you're posting is something that you stand by and isn't harmful and isn't, particularly salacious, then that's probably fine. And so it would always be very funny because my students would find my TikTok and they'd be like, I found your TikTok.
Yeah.
What did you think of it? And they're like, and their answer was always either it was okay or it was boring. Like, but that's it. You want, if what you're making is reasonable for school, your kids are probably going to go, well, I don't want to watch that. I
Sure.
just want to watch my teacher get in trouble. And you can't, like, you just, I think there's just a really important layer of responsibility of like, you just can't post like a bonehead and you'll be all right. It's the folks who take really silly, unnecessary risks who are the ones who are getting themselves into trouble. And I think being conscious of the fact that what you make is going to be seen by your students, I think kind of should be shaping what you post to at least some extent.
Well, and that was, that goes back to an old kind of adage that, I would hear, I probably shared at some time with whether it was teachers or students, is like, if you're embarrassed for your grandparents to see what you're posting publicly, maybe you shouldn't post it. And I don't know if that's 100% true, but it was a little bit of a frame of reference to help you think through the kinds of content that you would post or wouldn't post.
I also think it's really like, I was the generation of teacher who came up sort of in the growth of social media, in that sort of growth phase where like everybody was on Facebook and planning birthday parties.
Right.
And so when I was going through university, it was really hammered into us. Like, I took classes from Alec Kuros, who very early was saying like, be smart about what you post, be thoughtful about, you can post, that's fine, but be thoughtful. Recognize you're always a teacher, always. And so that was really beat into my head early. And so by the time I started posting, I had 15 years of practice of acting like a teacher in public.
Right.
And so I think that also helped a lot. Cause like, I don't know if I could be like, risque on camera or whatever, because I don't really know how to, I don't think I could. I think I'd be so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
I mean, obviously, yeah, your content isn't salacious in that. It's just that you have a very, specific point of view when it comes to politics, and there's no kind of guessing. I
yeah.
wonder what this guy thinks. Like, I know what he thinks about it, but so you've got your kind of like, this is my lane. I stay in it. I go hard. There's no surprises particularly. But that said, I guess I wonder, you talked about kind of the moment where you thought, well, maybe this is a thing, right? Your first sort of TikTok that blew up. But since that time, has there been a post or something that has garnered maybe an unexpected reaction, either positively or negatively, that you think, yeah, that was an interesting post that I will always remember, again, for good or for bad, or however, whatever stands out?
So I could give you a million guesses and you could never guess what my most viewed video was about. I could give you a million guesses and you'd never get it. Because in years upon years of making YouTube videos and TikToks about Canadian politics and about lots of different sort of Canadian specific topics, my most successful video of all time, viewed by like 3 million-ish people now, was about Boney M. And how they're the same guy who made all the music for Boney M made all the music for Milli Vanilli. Which is like just a delightful fun fact. And like literally it was around Christmas and the Boney M Christmas album resurfaces as it always does. And I thought, oh, this will be a fun thing to do. And it exploded. My most viewed YouTube video for a very long time was a critique of Jordan Peterson. And that brought some wild folks to my page.
Yeah, but
like
that's
what you
I don't think that's surprising, but maybe the
Yeah.
comments were pretty.
Yeah, and, like, what you talk about cultivates your audience. So, like, if you start, talking smack about Jordan Peterson, the Jordan Peterson people are gonna flood your comments and pick a bunch of fights.
Sure.
And it's why I often it goes back to that focusing on the powerful thing. I'm just gonna pick on politicians. Like, do I actually care about Jordan Peterson? Not really. Like,
He's a big boy. He can take it.
he can go and wrestle with God on his own time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. So then that brings me to another question I have. So I think, again, you kind of shared a little bit about this on TikTok. And so I got a bit of an insight. By the way, just so you know, I don't, it's not like I do a ton of research on this. So it's not like a good interview would like watch a whole bunch of stuff. Like I'm bringing what I know to it. So ignorant as it is. But I do remember you talking about, kind of in shifting to a more like not the TikTok quick bite thing, but like this sort of
Mhm,
12 to 15-minute kind of commentary, I don't know, daily showish kind of
mhm.
vibe, if you will. And so you're producing content regularly. I don't know if it's daily, but regularly for whatever, like,
Yeah, there's basically videos coming out. I put out like 5 to 10 videos and clips of streams most days. Like, it's a high volume game.
yeah. So I'm curious about that. But I'm also curious about
Mhm.
kind of how you determine content. So is it like, all right, so this is who I am. I got to talk about politics. I got to talk smack about Mo. I got to tell you about federal stuff. I kind of have these things. Or do you just like on a whim say, I'm going to talk about Boney M today, or I saw something weird that has nothing to do with your sort of regular cadence and or vibe, but just because this is what strikes me as something I want to talk about unrelated to that political world, that I'll include that? Or
Yeah.
do you say like, "Oh, I can't do that because that's not what they expect?"
So I have different venues for different things, and that really helps. I make more content than any reasonable person should. So 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday, I get up at 5 in the morning and start scripting, and I make a daily video. Those are usually between about 8 to 12 minutes. It's not even by design. That's just usually it winds up being about a 3 to 4 page script. I dictate my script so I can write quite quickly because I just sit in a chair and ramble and then edit it into something worthwhile over coffee. But then 4 days a week, I do a live stream where I'll break down sort of politics issues of the day. And that's my space for nonsense. If there is something silly I want to talk about, if there's some random goofy thing I want to talk about, that's the space for it.
And how do you script that? You
Um,
just kind of like bullet points. I'm going to talk about these talking points, or you just press
so
record
every
live and go.
every day I make it looks a lot like a lesson. Honestly, I make a stream plan where I break down the sequence of the topics that we're going to go through. And just like I was teaching a social studies lesson, I lay out, okay, here's what we're going to talk about today. Here's the sequence. Here's the points of what we're going to talk about. And I break it down literally. It's just a social studies lesson.
Right.
There's no secret sauce. But much like when you're in the classroom, sometimes after a real heavy story, maybe you tell a silly one.
Right.
Sometimes after a really difficult topic, maybe you talk about something that doesn't matter. Maybe it's not even on the curriculum. It's just interesting. And that's got to be part of it too. And so there's lots of space for that sort of thing. Like yesterday, we had an argument about whether to call recreational property a cottage or a cabin, just for fun,
Right.
just because that's a kind of fun thing to. And so then each week on Sundays, I also put out like a 40-minute show called What the Hell Canada, that is the stuff that falls through the cracks. That is, it's usually provincial stories because the federal stories usually keep me on my toes through the week. And then there's little segments called Anyways, where it's just whatever nonsense I want to share. And one called Way to Go Canada, where it's good news. And so I make a lot of stuff and don't sleep enough.
Yeah, no, and I like that, and I think that kind of helps me, sort of understand how you, because I mean, I think about the stuff like there's lots of weird things that I want to like. I want to talk a lot about golf, but I know that like that's a very niche audience. That how would I do that in any kind of way? But there's going to come a day where I'm going to do what you do, and that is like I just talk about what I want to talk about, whether anybody cares about it or not. But
Mhm.
I applaud you for sort of finding your way. A couple more questions and this, and I want to just even as you sort of made the decision that said, all right, I've been teaching for, 15 whatever years, and I think I should try this opportunity. And so I presume you took a leave of absence like I did when I left the classroom, just because you had a
Mhm.
little safety net there for a little while. Like, what went into that decision that said, I mean, obviously there were financial considerations. There was just whether this is something I would enjoy doing with my time. Like, what went into that decision?
I'm trying to decide how deep I want to go with this. Let's go for it. What the hell? So it goes back to COVID, actually. COVID was hard. COVID was really hard, and things never really recovered after COVID. And I don't just mean like the academics. The academics struggle, but academics ebb and flow. They always have. Um, it was the social fabric of schools got really devastated during that time. And a lot of the things that made the job joyful became more difficult. It became harder to spend, have casual chats with the kids because they were all locked in their desks all day and all that sort of stuff. And then the year after that, they were all, they'd all been
You're all
through this
scared.
awful trauma that was so disruptive, and that there's a lot of unresolved trauma. So that was one big part of it, was just COVID was hard and nobody ever quite recovered. But as that continued, the environment around the job got a lot harder. Um, you know, there was a really ugly round of bargaining, and I I don't think it's really a secret that the nature of teachers' relationships with parents has broadly changed a lot too, and that impacted me quite a bit too. There were some fantastic parents, obviously, but there was also some challenging parents.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where the stress of the job was really getting to me. And I took medical leave for a period of time, and I was going through it. I was really having a hard time. And at the same time, the channel was succeeding. At the same time, things were growing. It was a big risk. The month that I decided to take my leave of absence, I decided I made $300 that month off of my TikTok or off of my content. I made $300, and I'm like, I can probably make a go of this. And thank God it actually worked. But I kind of decided to take the leave of absence because it was literally, I was at a point where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Um, it's not that I didn't love the job. I always loved the job. I always loved working with the kids. It's that it was taking so much out of me.
Mhm.
Like, I was just so used up. And so now it's really interesting. As decision time of whether or not to go back was getting closer, I had a lot of family and friends who were like, please don't go back. You seem the most
Better.
yourself you've seemed in a
Yeah.
decade. They're like, the life is back in you. Like, and they knew I was working longer hours. I was working, especially during the election, I was working like 14, 15, 16 hours a day. I'd get up at 5 and start recording,
Right.
and I'd be working till 8 or 9 each night, and then same thing again the next day. Less tired than when I was teaching. It's just so demanding.
It
And I
is.
don't think until I stepped away, I fully understood how demanding it was and how long I had been worn out for. It's so interesting because my love of the job never really diminished. I still loved it. I still miss it. I just don't miss the way I felt when I was doing it, and I feel a lot better now that I'm not doing it. You
Yeah.
know?
I
Like,
mean,
but
I
it's a
don't think
time,
your
it's a time
story
spent.
is that unique. I think it's very universal. And I mean, it's one of the kind of things that just drives me in terms of like, okay, what little part can I play in helping teachers not feel that way, not feel so tired? And
Mhm.
I'm very cognizant of like, what I'm not going to tell you is like, oh, take some yoga classes, like, drink tea. Like, that's
Just
not
just
because the work.
there's coffee in the staff room, we got you.
Yeah. I mean, this is and it's been exciting in one sense that when I've talked to school districts about it, I said this is largely a you problem. And I understand when I say you as a system, you have you yourself as a school district have one part to play, then you have the government that has another part to play, and then there's like everybody is sort of contributing to what that feeling is. But what in your locus of control, what should you and can you be doing as a school division, as a school, as a principal? Because everybody can be doing something, even if it's just small things that say, like, you could change the way you do that, the way you talk to people, the way,
Mhm.
invite people to not do certain work, take things off, all that stuff. And it's just that, everybody's living in the busyness, running around like maniacs
Mhm.
to stop and say, whoa, we'll just slow down for a second. Let's think about this. And it's not necessarily about blaming it, but it's just saying like, what can we do here more broadly to make a difference? And I'll stop my rant here in a second, but I always, whenever I was on, so I was on local bargaining here in Moose Jaw for a number of years. And whenever I talked to the local bargaining or provincial bargaining, I'd say like, it's great. Let's ask for a salary increase for sure. But my other question is like, what would it take for you to accept a 0% increase? Like what changes could be fundamentally made to the job that you would say, I would take 0% increase if you could take away all of this stuff? Because in the end, like 3% is great and it's important. I'm not denying that shouldn't be a part of it, but that's not, you didn't leave your job because you didn't get a 3% raise. Like that wasn't the
No,
reason that you said, I can't do it.
no.
So that's just takes more energy and creativity and does, deal with like even that whole class complexity issue was like the government couldn't wrap their head around. It's like, look, that is yeah, it is complex, but it's also a real thing that you have to try to figure out to some degree. It's not as easy as just saying, here's some money, take it. Like it's
Mhm.
not what it is. Yeah.
There's so many layers to it, but I think a huge portion of it is that people have really lost a concept of shared responsibility. And I think that's what we see in schools. I think it's what we see in governance. I think it's what we see in a lot of stuff, like the shared responsibilities between, provinces and school boards. Provinces have largely said, school boards, you're responsible for everything, but we're going to hold your funding down. So all the things that you have to cut, that's going to be your fault. But we're
Right.
going to,
And you can't collect
we're
money on
holding,
your own anymore. We'll do that for you. So you have, okay, I guess.
and that's it. The shared responsibility gets broken down. And the same thing happens with teachers and parents, right? The concept of the shared responsibility of raising children has gotten really muddled. And there are a lot of people who just sort of ship their kid off to school and say, well, go raise them for me and I'll bring them home and be their buddy for a while. And it's really tough. And I think that's going to be a really essential part of it is the walls of the school have gotten very high. I think there's a lot of parents who are very disconnected from the school experience. There are a lot of parents who, frankly, have no earthly idea what's going on. There are a lot of politicians who don't have the slightest clue what's going on. Most people's conceptions of what school is like were formed when they were about 10 and haven't really moved since. And so I think that's the key to making things better is breaking down those walls, getting community members into schools more, getting parents into schools more, and getting schools out in the community and out getting real life experiences more too.
And in some respects, there's lots of problems in the world where, people have very different ideologies and beliefs around particular topics. But in this case, it seems like this should be easier because we actually pretty much all agree that we're trying to help children. Like we're all in it to do that. Everyone's goal is, I get the nuances can be different, but in the end, like, all right, that's what we're trying to do. And yet we still can't get to that place of sharing this responsibility to do right by kids.
It's because there's two very different perspectives about what schools should do. There's the perspective that schools should build kids like factory widgets, and there's the perspective that kids should be cultivated like a garden, right? And those are in very significant tension, right? Like you don't grade a garden, right? But you do grade an assembly line. And so the assembly line, the industrial model of education has very much won out, but the research in a lot of cases doesn't support it. And so you've got this system that's trying to support itself saying like, well, this is the way we do things. And then you've got other systems in like Nordic nations and Scandinavian nations and things like that that are doing like a much more sort of cultivating sort of approach to education. And the kids are thriving. It's succeeding like crazy. And we're going, yeah, but we can't do that here. And it's like, well, why not? Well, because factory schools are built like factories. So I guess we got to run them like factories. And it's like, or we could do some rethinking here. But the problem is that's going to require not only investment, but it's going to require vision.
Yeah.
And part of the problem is nobody is really bringing any different vision for a model of education to the table in a way that's getting any real traction. Like there are folks talking about it, but it hasn't really broken through
Yeah.
to the public mindset yet.
Yeah. And so what happens in the interim is rather than big systemic changes, we do see pockets where, whether it's individual teachers or the odd school here or there, maybe the odd school district is working towards those kind of changes in the incremental ways that they always have
Mhm.
because of again, the education system. It's hard to explain it to people in business sometimes because, again,
Mhm.
using well, this is how businesses operate and blah, blah, blah. And just, I mean, it's the same argument where people say, well, government should run like a business. Government is not a business. Like these are very different entities. And
Mhm.
because you see success, growth, whatever, that you do not apply the same principles because they're like to your point, they're fundamentally different objectives here. And who was telling me that I was reading it? I think it was Michael Lewis was talking about government can't run a business. Government does all the things that no business ever wants to do because there's no money to be made. So
Yep.
they're in charge of like, you do all these things and make these schools and hospitals and so forth. Like we can't make money on these things. And yet governments try to make money on sometimes. But generally speaking, our democracy is built around governments doing things that businesses don't want anything to do with because
Yeah.
they cost
But
money and they
but
don't.
they try to but they try to run it like a business, and it's why you wind up with so many staff meetings and so many internal discussions and so much direction setting that's focused on things like reading statistics or numeracy statistics rather than best practice,
Right.
right? It's all about what makes the number go up, what makes, how do we get these kids to grade level, right? Rather than how do we make this kid a functioning member of society? How do we make this kid feel safe? How do we nurture this kid? How do we prepare this kid for future learning? It's like, nope, line go up. Just got to make the line go up.
Yeah. No, for sure. I'm going to give you, well, I'm going to give you two more educational questions and we'll kind of put an end. So we've been talking again, my show has the word leadership in the title. So when you think of your favorite educational leaders, if you want to name them, you can. If you just want to talk in terms of attributes, you can. In your tenure, when you think of your favorite leaders, the ones that really were like, these are the people I would work for and, sort of run through the wall through kind of thing. Like what made those people, what attributes or habits do you think made them successful leaders?
So I've had good principles along the way. I've had good experiences with administrators. Like I've never had real, trouble.
Yep.
I've had overall pretty positive experiences. But when I think of an educational leader who was like transformational in my career, it's not an administrator. It was my first teaching job was in the UK. I taught in a school in central London that was struggling. It was a school with pretty significant challenges. Um, my first day I was subbing there and I showed up at the front door and this lady opened the door and welcomed me in and the principal or the headmistress waved both I and the teacher into the office. The teacher was told to take me up to her classroom and show me her lesson plans, which she did. She was quite confused and then went downstairs and then came back upstairs fired. I still don't know what on earth happened. Still no clue. But I was asked to stay and take on that job and I kept saying no and I basically got begged into staying. And I'm bad at saying no to people, so I wound up staying at that job for a fair while. But my teacher neighbor, we shared a door. His name was Mansuk Harani. Still is, I assume. He saw a guy who was in miles over his head and he didn't let me drown. He didn't take over, like he wasn't that kind of guy. He would just wander in and say the thing that he knew I needed to hear. Or even sometimes he would just commiserate. Sometimes we'd just go for lunch and get a breath of fresh air outside the building. But it was the most significant leadership I got in my educational career because it was so human and it was so personal. Like I will never forget. I was trying really hard to show off and impress everybody because I was a first year teacher and I covered all the classroom in really cool displays, all the like we read here and all that, all this stuff. And I stayed in all weekend doing it and he came in on Monday morning. And he said, "Looks great. Whose work is on the walls?" And I went, I had to take it all down because he was right. He said the thing I needed to hear. And he was just really outstanding at that. And I genuinely don't know if I would have stayed a teacher and made it through that first period of time without him there. So yeah, shout out Manny.
Yeah. And those are those little subtleties of, they're not sort of big showy kind of leadership traits that we often think about. It's just being really poignant when you need to be and giving you the right at the right time, and also respecting the fact that, all right, you already have a bunch of skills. It's not like you can't do anything here, but like,
No.
I know that at some point, you're probably going to need somebody that just props you up, gives you a little bit of
Yeah.
encouragement, whatever that is, right? So, no, I like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
And again, I think a lot of us probably, when we think of those people, like there's a lot of people that we probably think, yeah, that's how they did it. Like it did. And I'm sure he didn't consciously think, oh, here's now I'm being a leader. Like I'm sure that
No, and
had
that's
nothing
it.
to do with
Is
it.
sometimes a leader is just somebody who makes somebody who's struggling feel seen and maybe asks the right questions. Like he was never really one to just stand there and give advice. He just asked the question that I needed to think about.
Yeah. No,
He was really good at that.
yeah, I so appreciate there are a few people in my life who are just really good at asking the right questions that in a very non-threatening, non-offensive way make me reconsider things and go like, "Oh, maybe I should do something differently here." So that is definitely a gift. My last question in it for the education side of it is, okay, you've got a young person, the University of Regina is thinking about going into education, maybe they've graduated, whatever that might be, and they're coming to you and asking you about becoming a teacher and what advice you might give to them. And I don't know, maybe your advice is don't do it. It's not the right job. Or maybe the right, because you are currently, I get the same thing. It's like, well, you're not actually no, I'm not in the classroom anymore. So I may not. But what do you say to people like that who are thinking about a career in teaching? Like, what advice would you kind of give them?
I mean, my first is usually I'll tell them like it's not a career to muse about idly. Like you got to really want to do it. It's not one for the casual person. But I think the biggest advice that I always give to new teachers is, or sort of caution I give, or I don't even know how I would describe it, is if you're going to be a teacher, a successful teacher, you need to vividly remember very clearly what it was like to be a kid. And the minute you can't remember what it was like to be a kid, I think you're probably done because you need to be able to sympathize and empathize with the experience of the people in your classroom. You need to recognize how you're going to come across to a kid. It doesn't mean you need to, still be a big kiddo. I mean, that helps sometimes, but like it's about remembering the experience, remembering the feelings of powerlessness, remembering the feelings of your life being determined for you. I think that is probably one of the most essential tools for a good teacher that we don't talk about enough.
Yeah, and I go back to I had an experience, and you're reminding me of an experience that I had recently with, and I'm blanking on his name, but he took us through an exercise of sort of reconnecting to your childhood, and it sounds kind of therapy or weirdish or whatever, but it was really a lovely experience where everybody kind of found a picture of when they were a kid and talked about like what were you thinking of that at that time, what try go back in that moment in time as a 12-year-old, as a 14-year-old, as an 8-year-old, whatever, and do your best to say like, what would you tell that kid about how life is going to go? Like, here, pay attention to these things. Like these are things I'll warn, the back to the future kind of thing where you can warn yourself, but just a whole bunch of time thinking about, and I mean, I'm just one who fondly has a fond recollection of childhood. So I think about it a lot because it was a wonderful time in
Mhm.
my life. And maybe that's why I've never kind of forgotten what it's like to be a kid because I loved to be a kid and it was great times. But, remembering that, oh, yeah, like that's how I perceived life at the time. Like that's what I thought of that situation. And I didn't fully grasp or, understand. But yeah, that's an important thing. I'm glad you kind of raised that.
I had a good childhood in a lot of ways. Like my parents were good parents, but my experience as a kid was a lot of feeling misunderstood and a lot of feeling left out. And so I think that was always something that helped inform me as a teacher is like that very vivid remembrance of what it was like to be a kid who adults were not listening to. Or in my case, like a lot of it was my peers not listening to me. I was a bit of an unusual act surprised. This sound didn't play well in grade school. But
Smart assery or something of that nature. I don't know.
I had a big mouth. And I didn't know when to shut it. And so I was a bit of an isolated kid in a lot of ways. Like I had my little circle of friends, but I definitely was not, one of the cool kids. And so that sort of alienating experience in a lot of ways helped to inform me as a teacher. And it helped me to be because there's sort of two takeaways from that, right? There's people who say, well, I'm going to make sure everybody feels like this. I'm going to pass on the hazing rituals and all of that. Or there's people who think I'm going to make sure nobody ever goes through that again. And I was very much of the second kind.
Yeah. Well, and I think about the kids that sort of resonated with me were the goofballs, the kids, because I was the kid trying to make everybody laugh or whatever. And so the kids that would sometimes other teachers would hate because they were always goofing around. Like I had a soft spot for them, right? Because I remembered that what
Mhm.
that was like. So I just think, one of the beautiful things about a school is that you have hopefully a diverse set of adults who have had different experiences and can relate to all the kids, right? Like the kid that is always like, a lot of teachers were good students, growing up. And so, yeah, they tend to, there's a bit of a bias towards the kid that'll, do what they're told and get all the good grades and stuff. And they're less work for everybody when those kids.
Mhm.
But those are the kids that probably need us less than the ones that do feel weird and just struggling like crazy to fit in. Never mind all of the kids that have challenges in a home life that we can't even possibly fathom.
Oh,
Like
percent.
that's a whole other, issue to deal with. But I think that's wise and sage advice. All right. Kind of I guess, I don't know, fun. I call them fun questions. They're not, I don't know if fun they are, but they're less serious. So
Let
actually,
me determine if they're
you will.
fun.
So this is a question that I don't actually have, but I wanted to ask you before. So when you think about sort of role models on social media, YouTube specifically,
Mhm.
who do you look at and say, like, that person's doing it the way I aspire to, or, just sort of has it like figured out to a level that you say, kind of try to pattern some of my approach to that person,
It's interesting because there's nobody who quite does what I do.
right?
Like when I think of examples I look up to as far as the sort of content that I make, I think it's not hard to see that I'm aiming at Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert
Sure.
and John Oliver a little bit. When it comes to online content, like the streamers that I watch, like there's the Surfs, who are a Canadian politics streamer who I definitely like. That's a cool one because like he started out as a streamer and YouTuber I watched, and now he's a friend and still a streamer and YouTuber I watch. And so that's been a really cool experience
Mm.
coming to know these people because you also come to see how they operate sort of off camera. And in the case of somebody like him, and in the case of a lot of the people I've had the good fortune to work with, they're just really nice people. They're cool people, and like
So you've
they
built
work
quite a
hard.
community with sort of the YouTube crowd. Do
Oh,
you have a good,
community is everything. There's no way to do it without community.
yeah.
Um, like you wind up connecting with people. Like just last month, like I connected with George Strombolopoulos because he was hanging out on my YouTube video or my YouTube live chat, and we wound up doing an interview, and it was awesome. But also, like the community is what props up the content. It's really interesting because, like, one of the things there's different metrics that you track, and one of the things that I keep an eye on is returning viewers, and people come back a lot, and my audience is very consistent, and a big part of that is I have a Discord server where I've got like nearly 2,000 people who just hang out and talk about politics, and are brought together by sort of a shared affinity for my content. And so they want to keep the chat going from the live streams, and they do it in the server. And so that sort of community really helps to keep me connected to people and keep those social needs going. Having sort of that second layer of the community where you're in touch with other content creators and stuff really helps a lot too. Like for something like election night, I did a stream with a half a dozen other content creators, and it was really cool because it's an election night. You're filling a lot of air. And when you have a bunch of really compelling, personalities on camera, that makes your life a ton easier. And so it's sort of standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reciprocity that probably happens, like you
Oh,
supporting their work, there was like, then there's enough.
yeah.
It's not
I
like a zero-sum game here, like, there's enough pie to go around for everybody.
I don't know why I expected it to be a competitive space. It's not. Like if somebody, like Lance shows my videos on his stream lots and makes sure that he pushes my audience to go or his audience to go subscribe. If I show somebody's videos on my stream, we push them to go subscribe. Like we pause it and say, "Okay, everybody take a moment, go subscribe, go give them a like." We're all supporting one
Yeah.
another, and like it's really notable that the creators who are way more focused in picking fights never seem to break out of that sort of one level that they get stuck at. Like it seems like it becomes hard to grow your audience when your content becomes focused on other creators. And so the more positive creators who are more focused on doing the good work are the ones who I seem to have kind of gravitated to, and it's been really awesome.
So, with these 15-hour days, and I hope they're not all 15-hour days, I hope that,
Oh no.
okay.
No, that was just the election sprint.
All right. So, what about when you again, you love what you're doing. It takes a lot of time. But what about just like reading? So, what are you kind of reading or consuming these days in terms of, I'll say, professional growth, however you define that?
Ooh. So, like, it's been really interesting because I've been focused on politics so much when I'm on camera. I tend to focus on less political stuff. When I do try to political content sometimes and try to inform myself. I've been reading a lot of David Graeber lately. And if folks are looking for sort of a toolkit to think about larger political systems in the world, David Graeber is just fantastic for that. I've been down a bit of a David Graeber rabbit hole. But like right now I'm reading the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien, like because I never read it and I'm a nerd and feel like that's a rite of passage. I need to know names of elf kings and Um but yeah, it's as far as professional reading, like with education,
Wow.
uh,
Yeah.
nothing's springing to mind. It's been a minute because like I haven't been in the classroom for a year and it's been pretty clear for a while that I probably wasn't going back. I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, I read Mark Carney's book. Does that count?
Sure. Absolutely.
It's dull as dishwater. I think that's going to be the new book that people pretend they read.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't really a big seller when it came out. From people at that time didn't even know who Mark Carney
It's a
was.
it's a real barn burner about ethics-based capitalism. Hoo-wee. You pay for the whole seat,
Like,
but you only need the
the
edge.
saying, the meeting could have been an email. It's like, could that not have been a blog post? Like, just tell me
It's but this is the thing is
the
it reads
LDR.
like a doctoral dissertation. It's in depth and it's dry.
Yeah, no, I got to run that through Gemini probably at some point.
Mhm.
What about, okay, so the other one is guilty pleasures, like binge watching, just like, okay, I guess gotta watch something really mindless. You got like mindless stuff you like to consume as well?
Oh yeah,
Okay, good.
absolutely. Okay, your audience, I'll tell you right now, if you want to have the best time, my wife and I's favorite like time waster show is a YouTube series from Japan called Kaso. It is like like Ninja Warrior, that sort of thing. It's that, but it's skateboards. They do obstacle courses on skateboards, and it's just like a group of usually 8 to 10 skateboarders who are the most encouraging, positive, fun people you've ever seen doing it on these like huge courses, like very professional. Like it's a TV show in Japan, I believe, or something along the lines. And like you will sit there and you'll go, there is no way I'm going to watch an hour-long video of people riding a skateboard down a hill. You will, and you're going to love every moment of it because it's just the most fun thing in the universe.
That,
Um,
yeah, like that kind of thing
yeah,
just fascinates me. Like, hey, how does that even? Because if you just said to somebody like, "Watch this show about this," like there's not a chance. But if it works, it's like, okay, why does it work? Like, what's going on here in my brain and on the screen that's making this?
it works because it's fun and it's joyful.
Yeah,
It is like
yeah.
they're competing with one another. Like the final thing is for 1,000,000 yen. And like they are throwing their bodies down these crazy obstacle courses for 1,000,000 yen. And then you look up what 1,000,000 yen is. It's like 8 grand. Like it's money, but it's like you probably don't need to explode your whole body for this, guys. But it's just fun to watch. That would be one of my big I don't know if it's guilty,
Yeah,
but, like,
yeah,
it's definitely a thing that I spend a lot of time on, and I'm a gamer, I'm a video game guy. That's sort of when I'm sort of blowing off steam, that's what I spend my time on.
yeah, yeah. All right. So the last one, experience Regina. What? You don't have to sing the song, but that's the
China.
one. So what are the less so little Regina tourism opportunity here? So somebody is driving through, coming to a conference, whatever they're there for, and you want to show off a little bit. Like where would you say you should go? Hidden treasure, gem, it's just some place that's like people don't know about this, but they should. What is that place?
A place that people don't know
Restaurant,
about, but
park,
sure.
speakeasy,
Yeah,
whatever.
speakeasy. I will say, if my wife and I are going out for supper and we're willing to drive a little bit, we go to Miso-ya for sushi in the East End. And I'd say that's probably our go-to. Although, if you want to see something very funny in Regina, in the north end of Regina is the sushi restaurant we go to when we don't want to drive. It's called Let's Sushi, and it's very funny because it's in an old Swiss chalet, and the letters on the sign are repurposed from Swiss chalet. And so, like, there's a couple of like they had to get a new apostrophe and one other letter. I can't remember what. but it's all the Swiss Chalet letters reconfigured as Let's Sushi. Favorite thing.
That is very
And it's
cool.
oh, it's very but the funniest thing is they didn't redecorate it. There's like chickens on the walls. It is still just a Swiss Chalet.
There's
But
something
with, like, a
unpretentious
secret
about
train
that. I just go like, yeah, that's right. Like, it's like, we
So
know we're not even trying. Like, there's no one
No.
pretending here.
It's genuinely kinda delightful. Like, we go there because it's pretty good, and we get a genuine kick out of the fact that, like, this is just a fried chicken restaurant or rotisserie chicken restaurant that's a sushi joint now with a drive-through. Fascinating
Yeah,
place.
no, I love that. Yeah. There's a lot of fun sort of immigrant moves that are made that you go like, yeah, these people just said, here's how we're doing it, whatever. Like we're not trying to play your game here. We're just going this way. I love it. Well, listen, this has been a delight too. I actually had a whole bunch of more questions that I was going to ask. So maybe there's a part 2 to this at some point as we see.
Sure thing.
I'm sure if we reconnect in whatever, a year, 6 months, I'm sure there'll be all kinds of interesting things that will have happened in your world that I may want to tap into. Listen, thanks for the time. All the best with the channel and the work you're doing. I think there's obviously you've got an audience that's finding value. You're finding some joy in it and still kind of being a teacher at the same time. So that's all good.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.